You're listening to the Chorus One podcast, a show that covers decentralized networks and their impact on the evolution of automated and borderless economies. On this podcast, we invite pioneers and builders to discuss the decentralized protocols and projects they are working on. On this show today, we have Dean Tribble, co-founder and CEO of Agoric Systems. Agoric is a developer-friendly environment and economy for expressible, programmable, composable, and secure smart contracts. Agoric aims to be a platform that offers developers a secure version of JavaScript to deploy smart contracts safely into. Agoric's own network encourages cooperative economic activity using two tokens: Run, a stablecoin, and Build, a staking token. The Agoric economy uses novel incentives to promote the safe execution of smart contracts in a stable economy. We speak to Dean about using JavaScript to enhance security of smart contracts, the pros and cons of composability, the minimal set of market institutions to run a smooth economy, and why paying for execution of rent and postage using a stablecoin is critical for economic accounting and interoperability.
Welcome to another episode of the Chorus One podcast. Today with a return guest, Dean Tribble from Agoric. Hi, Dean, and welcome back on the Chorus podcast.
Hello, Chorus One.
And Dean, so maybe to get started, so maybe not everyone has listened to the last episode, which is a shame. But maybe you can, again, kind of introduce yourself and Agoric.
Sure. Well, first, pause right now. Go listen to the next episode. Then you can the last episode. Then you can continue. Well, first, before all that, I did want to extend Agoric's best wishes to Meher Roy, who is out with illness, and best wishes to him and his family for his speedy recovery and getting back to being healthy and connected to all the rest of us. So, we look forward to seeing him back.
No, thank you. And really appreciate that shout out for Meher. And obviously all our thoughts are definitely with Meher right now. I'm stoked to have you on the podcast today. Agoric is really interesting. You know, what you're doing, sort of smart contract building on top of a layer on Cosmos SDK. I mean, you'll explain it much better than me. Maybe for our listeners,
Sure.
Just a sort of high-level overview of what you're doing there.
Absolutely. So I've been working on smart contracts for a long time. Agoric was founded by, pioneers in this space. So I worked on the first production smart contract in 1989. So we've been doing it for a while. Mark Miller did the Agoric Open Systems papers that first really articulated software agents creating and participating in markets. And so we've been doing disruptive technology and thinking about this kind of thing for a very long time. From our perspective, a smart contract is software that's orchestrating the cooperation between multiple third parties, right? So it's enforcing the terms of a contract-like arrangement between third parties. So it predates blockchain by a lot. Uber, Lyft, PayPal, eBay, Venmo, a lot of Amazon, high-frequency trading. Those are all software that's enforcing the terms of a relationship between third parties. And once you realize that that was a special category, then you can think about how do you do that best so that they can cooperate, they can do dispute resolution, they can trust the infrastructure, all that kind of thing. And what blockchain really brought to that is the trust the infrastructure, because now it runs with really high integrity. The problem with current systems, with the current blockchain environment, is it's pretty hazard prone. Either it's not expressive enough, it's not programmable enough, or if it's programmable, it's hazard prone. So there's been lots of security losses, security vulnerabilities were exploited for tens of millions of dollars with essentially no recourse because of the security hazards in the systems that people are programming with now. And so our goal is to make it more accessible and make it safer so you can get much more rapid evolution by a lot more people, right? So at best, there's 10,000 people that can program in real systems in Ethereum, whereas there's 10 million plus developers in JavaScript. And so we're doing smart contracts for the rest of the world. We're doing smart contracts so that all the fintech developers out there that have a very cool idea, that are already very entrepreneurial, and they look at the current ecosystem and they go, yeah, I'll wait. I'll wait till it's a little bit more programmable, a little bit safer, a little bit less I won't say crazy because it'll get even more crazy as more developers get in there, but a little bit less rough, right? I can use real development tools with real testing environment to ship real products, right? And so that's what we're going for is a platform in a secure version of JavaScript that millions of developers can build smart contracts and deploy them quickly and safely in an environment. And so the mantra, there's sort of the build fast, earn fast, be able to build stuff and get it out there fast. But then it's really following the model of kind of DeFi, Node.js for DeFi or React.js for DeFi, being able to take components like you could do with React and put them all together into a application that you built quickly. And I'll go into a lot more about that as we get into composition later. So.
No, definitely. And I think, JavaScript for sure is something that many developers can really resonate with. Maybe an interesting question for our listeners might be, so you are a Cosmos SDK based chain. Why did you choose Cosmos?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we looked at several systems, Polkadot being the obvious other one, but we looked at others as well. And we looked very hard at some of those technology stacks. The reason why we ended up with Cosmos is because of a much deeper alignment than just the tech stack. Fundamentally, we need, an account model and we need fast finality, right? But more than that, we're all about and have always been all about loose coupling of independent agencies. So smart contracts, when they predate blockchain, it was really about independent services in a secure distributed network, all cooperating in various ways. And the overall model of decentralization to me seems very aligned with independent chains being able to connect, being able to have multiple islands that have their own rules, all communicating and cooperating. And that's very much the IBC world, the interchain world. And once we actually realized that, then the connection was pretty obvious. We originally did not dive first into Cosmos because Go language has non-determinism to it, and we were worried about the challenges of non-determinism in the Go language for making the kind of deterministic execution that you need for individual validators to be able to agree reliably. The team did an amazing job at that, and we've since done our own little bits of Go programming, and it was definitely a struggle. So I am really impressed with what they did in Cosmos SDK. But that was why we were slow to initially get in. But man, the alignment really just made a big difference. And then later we found out when there was the Cosmos conversations and we were talking about IBC, we started working with the AIB team and ICF on IBC. And it was only after we were well into working on that we discovered that they were very directly inspired on IBC by some of our earlier work. So they were inspired by the Elang website. Prior to them meeting us, we had no idea. We got started working with Cosmos. We got started working on IBC before we ever found out any about this. It was just one of those elements of, we were just sort of all aligned because we were coming from the same philosophical place of lots of independent actors loosely coupling to try and cooperate better.
That's super interesting. And now I guess you're moving towards also a launch of your chain, right? I think one thing that we want to highlight in this episode is also the Agoric chain itself, like where you're at. You also follow the Cosmos model of doing an incentivized testnet, which Game Stakes dates back now quite a while, I think. And maybe, can you share a little bit how that has been going, where Agoric is at right now as a network, and what was interesting?
Absolutely. Maybe. So we are doing the incentivized testnet. It started in May, beginning of May, maybe late April. I don't know, right around there, in multiple phases, because we knew we had a lot. We have a very deep tech stack. We have lots of levels of the system. We need testing of various forms and testing of the integration of those pieces, watch how they interact, all that sort of thing. So we did we did the incentivized testnet in phases. And so, the first phase was simply onboarding. That's one where we knew it would be, picking the validators, getting them familiar with our build system, getting them to build the whole stack so they kind of, knew what they were getting into, and then let them go away for a couple of weeks and think about it, right? And then a phase of now testing that infrastructure, actually trying it, running it, doing restarts, seeing how versions of this tech stack that did not have all of our pieces in perform. So as we add in more of the fast restart elements, more of the governance, staking, all those kinds of things, we'd be able to see how it performed. So we're now in what I will call phase 4A, which is one of the stress phases. And the interesting thing about incentivized test nets, of course, you ask a bunch of questions in order to confirm things and learn things, and then you end up learning things that you obviously were not expecting. That's why we do tests. And so in each of these phases, we've learned something that we were not expecting, and then we have to go back and think about how we put stuff together. Even during the phase, you learn a little bit, and then you adapt to what you learned in order to get the maximum value out of the phase. So it's been a great group of validators that we've been learning from, and testing it and trying it and, delaying when we had to redo something or whatever it is. But we've learned an awful lot. So, and we've been able to roll out and test these new technologies that we've been developing leading up to these timed phases. So what we were only supposed to have one stress phase, by the way, but what we realized, before it happened, though we hadn't really talked about it, we sort of hinted to the validators that we're sticking in another phase soon with additional rewards, is we needed to focus on stressing one part of the system at a time. And so the current system, the cool tech, which I won't go very far into, right, is how validators, if they crash and restart, they have to replay from the beginning, right, is how it used to work. And then Cosmos added state sync so that it could more quickly sync up and so a validator restart could happen. But the model of smart contracts is I write a simple JavaScript component in the Agoric system. I write a simple JavaScript component, a module that has a single start function exported that is what the contract is going to be. So you can end up with very simple contracts that are very, very few lines of JavaScript code. And it just runs. It stays live persistently on chain forever. Well, if you've got 10,000 of those things, keeping them all in memory, not such a great idea. Your machine crashes. What do you do? So we have a model that it stays persistent forever. And prior to, as short as a couple of months ago, the way that would work is if a node crashed, it would come back up and it would replay all of the message coming in, re-execute all of the JavaScript. And because execution was deterministic, it would get to exactly the same place. And that works. That's worked for literally 2 years, right? But it's not very fast to restart. And so the model was always, that's the correct semantics, but now any node could take checkpoints and restart from checkpoints. And that, eventually would jive up with the Cosmos state sync. And so we'd be able to get very fast restart. So that just came online recently. So now we went from, okay, the machine is run for 20 days. So it'll take, 10 days to recover, or maybe 10 hours, right? But some amount of replay time. Now it's down to 14 seconds, right? But it's challenging because restart now impacts the deterministic replay. Is it still clearly deterministically in sync with all the other machines and so forth? So that's what we were learning in this last round of stress test. And then the next one will be all about metering, where we're now measuring. Obviously we've got to measure the execution time. We've got to have a model that contract programmers can program in terms of, so they can say, here's how much I'm willing to spend on that, and otherwise terminate it, that sort of thing. And so that will be the stuff that's in the next stress test is what happens if the system is overloaded. And we know things will keel over. I mean, Cosmos will keel over with the right kind of overload. So we're going to get to experience that firsthand. And tweak and tune it and put up defenses and, manage that in our ecosystem. So.
All right. Yeah, awesome. I think we can kind of take a little bit of step back, also just looking into what Agoric is, what it's trying to achieve, maybe going a little bit into, I think one thing that's really interesting for me is this idea of the integrated economy on Agoric. So maybe you give a little bit of overview of the different parts of Agoric and how that integrated economy works.
So, I mentioned earlier the mantra of build fast, earn fast. The build fast part is covered by composition, which we'll talk about later, and building in JavaScript using traditional tools. The question, though, is how do you get it out there? How do you get it so that you can have a working business? How do you integrate it into the rest of the businesses or activities happening? The rest of the DeFi happening. And my characterization of that is you need a place to put it. Right? Node.js, we model on Node.js. It was very successful because you could rapidly build things, and the place you could put them was the internet, right? And you could just connect directly to your customers. And in crypto, there aren't a lot of places, right? So 6 months ago, the only place really was Ethereum. to be able to, and that has all the security hazards, it has the expenses, it has the slowness of the Ethereum model. And so that wasn't a good enough place from our perspective for the things we wanted to enable people to do. I mean, there's a lot of evolution there, but it's starting to slow down because it's really hard and it's really dangerous. As a result of IBC coming out, now Cosmos is starting to be a place, right? With Osmosis and Thorchain and all these things starting to come online, right? It's starting to be a place for zones. But it's not yet a place for smart contracts. So I can't add, 30 lines of JavaScript in order to be a stop loss and deploy it somewhere, right? There's not a safe environment to do that. And so that's what we're bringing is, so our chain is designed to be a place. And to be a place for DeFi means not just, here's a programming language, knock yourself out. It's got to be a framework in which you can build things. So that's the composition stuff that we'll talk about. And then it's got to be an environment that you can deploy a business that isn't, sad music and tumbleweeds blowing in the distance, right? And so what we needed is, what do you need for an economy? Well, customers need to be able to come and look at the options available to them and compare them with each other. They need to be able to compare, do I hedge that way or buy insurance over there? And if one's in terms of Quatlus and the other is in terms of simoleons, now you're asking shoppers to do FX computations in their head to compare these currencies, which is just nuts, right? Similarly, if you're operating a business, you want to be able to compare all the assets you need to use, all the services you need to use. You want to be able to put them on a budget and compare them, right? This is just grease for an economy to function smoothly. Can you survive without it? Obviously, yes, but it's expensive, it's clumsy, it's hard to manage, it makes your business more complicated, and it makes it harder for customers to be able to compare and adopt these things. So what you have in a lot of the Ethereum community are a little bit of bridging across contracts, but mostly you have these isolated towers of software developed that they're all managing and trying to attract people into their towers. And what we'd much rather have is a populated business center that has lots of businesses that all provide different parts of the story that customers can use all of. And businesses that aren't just independently going to customers, but that use each other, right? I don't do my own shipping. I don't do my own postage. I don't do my own law. I farm that out to other companies. We want businesses that can rely on other businesses. And to do that, again, they've got to be priced in terms of the same units for that not to be a continuing source of friction in me operating my business or other people operating their business. And so what we came up with is, what's the minimal set of market institutions so that you can have an economy that works smoothly rather than just a software place to deploy things, right? And so those key elements, well, the most important one is a stable local currency, right? You come from other chains, you come across IBC, you come across the interchain, you show up, you convert some of your currency to the local currency to spend in local markets. So that's a stablecoin-like institution, but focused on being fully integrated with the chain, with rewards, with execution in a bunch of ways. And it's collateralizable in assets locally and assets brought over IBC from other chains. And that's one of the coolest things that a few chains now in the Cosmos ecosystem have started to show, which I think is going to be a sea change in the world of crypto, is now in the Cosmos ecosystem, we're no longer launching in a vacuum, right? We get to launch attached to big pools of assets. We get to launch attached to other chains. And you've seen a little bit of that with side chains in Ethereum, right? Optimism by itself would be totally uninteresting, right? It's only interesting because it's connected to other chains, in particular Ethereum. But we get much more launching as a peer in an ecosystem of assets from other cooperative parties that are actively pushing themselves forward and actively want to connect with us. That's just a whole new world of deploying chains. So we get to do that. That produces assets that can underpin the economy, where you can then get the local currency called RUN, R-U-N, and spend that in the local markets. Now, the ways in which it's integrated are interesting. So first is, I'll talk about RUN and then I'll talk about the other market institutions, right? So back to that, if I'm running a business, I've got rent, I've got postage, I've got other expenses. Those are not the center folk of my business. The center of my business is not how much postage I spend. It's how much I do things for my customers. And postage is just, an expense that I want a budget item for. But in most crypto systems, what we're doing is they're designed where you spend a volatile asset on these things that are just part of running your business, right? So if execution time on smart contracts is postage and rent, it's like you're spending Apple shares on your postage and rent. You can do that, but it's not as good at, it's not so great for budgeting. It's not so great for management. It's not so great for figuring out how your business is doing and how it's going to do next year. It means you're not sure what the price is this month versus next month of exactly the same service you got before, all those kinds of things. You can't compare them. Whereas being able to use, dollars, however bad they are, right, in some people's estimation, anything stable means you can do much better comparison of your underlying services and of, this month versus next month, this year versus next year, all those kinds of things. And so we pay for execution in the system with the stablecoin, with the local currency. Right, with the stable local currency. And so run is how contracts pay for execution. So all contracts will have some run, right? And they get paid in run. It's very easy for them to set up to get paid simple fees for doing the business that they're doing. And obviously they can easily, in our component model, make their own currencies, make their own liquidity tokens, make their own NFTs, decide they want to get paid in some other currency inside the system. That is astonishingly easy, and all the abstractions work across all these different assets. But it's real easy to take the local stable currency because everything converts into that. And now they don't have to be juggling 16 different things that they might or might not want to take. Right?
And this stable currency, can it be collateralized? Let's say with like Luna has an IBC, for example. Could someone use UST here, and collateralize a stable coin on your system with that? Would that work?
So there are two answers to that. The answer is technically yes. Actually, there are three answers. The answer is technically yes. It will be up to governance to decide that. So it's not quite, our system, it's our system, and we will not be the ones deciding that. And that's absolutely the kind of thing that we want to enable, and absolutely the kind of thing that we encourage is find responsible collateral to be able to do. And then the market and governance should figure out what's the right over collateralization ratio to reflect the risks inherent in that, so that the stable coin, so that the stable local currency is stable, right? And it's got, so another way that it's integrated into the economy is that it is, it's got pools of assets to be able to stabilize and pay off defaults if some asset falls too quickly, to be able to do the liquidations required to pay off the loan that you took. This is sort of standard stablecoin thing, is you're over collateralized. If that falls in value, worst case, the treasury can sell it off to pay off the debt you have. But if it recovers, you're fine and nothing happens. Right? And I'll talk more about that because that's one of the other market institutions. That collateralization ratio needs to be set by the market. If it falls too fast, so you have to sell it off at a loss, someone has to pay that difference so that the other people that took out, that have better collateral, aren't getting punished for it. And so there are mechanisms to do that. And indeed, the last ditch fallback is mint more staking token that the bank can then use to cover that collateral. So the stakers, the delegators, the people that are backing this economy, backing this ecosystem, they are backing safe execution of smart contracts in a stable economy. That is what the that is what the staking token is backing. And that's what people, when they want to be able to deploy a business, that's what they want to be able to rely on. And so that's what the system is designed to provide. And so connecting with all those collaterals, exactly like Terra, Luna, and whether it's Osmo, Atoms, ETH, Bitcoin, etc. All of those are good collateral.
And the run token, is it stable against the US dollar, or what's like our basket of currencies, or just USD?
Right. No, the target is stable against the US dollar, and that's not intended as self-serving since we're a US company. It's simply that most companies in the world can handle that. Yeah. And since we're one of the big elements of being able to program in JavaScript is we are a really we're a bridge to mainstream developers and mainstream use cases and mainstream applications. And what that means is we want to be something that existing businesses that are not yet in crypto but should be, that they can understand and interpret. And once they start participating, whether it's investing or getting staking tokens or deploying their own business, they want to be able to price that on their books alongside the rest of their businesses. And the rest of their businesses in the US obviously are priced in dollars. And in other countries, they can handle being priced in dollars. right? And so as a mechanism to be able to easily integrate to existing businesses, having something that can be valued approximately in dollars so they can compare, do I roll it, do I deploy to Amazon where I have to do my own redundant stuff in order to have it be integrity, and I have to go through compliance checks in the following way in order to prove myself and allow all of my customers to come in and inspect what I'm doing? Or do I deploy this application as a decentralized thing and cut all that crap out? Right. And that's a pricing comparison. I may run both and I can compare the value and the returns on those on the books. All of that is stuff that if it's, accounted for in a, and it's not about store of value. It's not about medium of exchange. It's about that unit of account. Right. The how do I price things so I can compare them? That's one of the key functions that lets you interoperate across multiple businesses. That's in some sense what we focus on with that stable local currency. And so that's why it's, I won't say pegged to the dollar, because it's not critical that it be a dollar. It's critical that it be stable. And then we peg it to a dollar for convenience.
And so if you have this native stablecoin in Agoric, in terms of the Agoric token itself, or, what you can envision for that, maybe to secure, the staking token. So if I'm interested in Agoric and I really want to take part in your economy, for example, why would I hold the Agoric token?
So the Agoric token, the underlying staking token is called Build, BLD. We just so love that name. That was so great. This all came out of, we really have to focus on the developers. We need to not focus on the investors. We got to focus on the developers that are going to build stuff. And it's just like, let's just call it that, right? So that's one of the key elements of the economy. So let me add one more of the market institutions, and then let me come back to that question. Is that okay? So the second market institution is the AMM, and we can obviously spend a lot of time on the AMM, but when I mentioned that you've got vaults that have collateral, and if the collateral falls too much, it sells. In existing Ethereum, nothing happens unless it's started off chain. The only way things happen is someone on off chain comes and sends a transaction in to go, holy crap, you're underwater. I want you to sell something. And then it goes and creates an auction. And then a bunch of people have to notice and come in and bid in the auction, all that sort of thing. We're an asynchronous system. We're a live system. We've got the system can wake up when prices cross a threshold, and so the bank knows knows what number, when the collateral falls below that, when the price of some asset falls below that it wants to wake up and think about liquidating or think about rebalancing or whatever it is. And so it can proactively do liquidations when it's critical for the market, and in this case it's set up to proactively liquidate against the local AMM. Right. So it has a component, and we'll talk about that, a component for doing liquidation that is replaceable by governance in terms of what's the liquidation strategy. And the current one is take those assets that need to be liquidated, go to the AMM and sell them. Right. And we will be doing additional things where there'll be a strategy to do that in a rate limited fashion. So it doesn't suddenly slam down the market. It does so based on the apparent liquidation and gives opportunity for off-chain arbitrage over IBC to be able to keep our local AMM, within a reasonable range of the rest of the exchanges that are available to us over IBC. And that effectively means we're liquidating against the extended IBC liquidity pool at some cost of modest arb for doing delayed liquidation. Right? Modest arbitrage fees that we're paying to the people that are shuffling assets onto the chain in order to cover the liquidations that are necessary there. So that's really cool. All of these pieces are market services that charge some fees, right? And so a key element of the economy is, even though you're paying run for execution, that is not the reward that goes to validators. That is not the reward that goes to the stakers, because that sets up a bad alignment that you see in other chains where the people operating the system want to raise the price, whereas what's good for the economy is lowering the price and increase the amount of transactions so that you get more economic activity. So our goal is more cooperative economic activity, and the validators should be aligned to want to increase the amount of activity that they're supporting so that they get more rewards as a result of that. So the fees that go into execution, they go into stabilizing the currency. They go into growing the economy. They go into increasing the capacity, into funds in the economy. And it's the fees for the economy that get paid to the validators and stakers, right? So it is the fees for exchange in that local AMM. It's the fees for loans of run in the vault. It's the fees for other services that happen that are not misaligned with the execution of the system. And so those go into a reward pool, and then they're paid to validators as a result. So the reason to want the build token is, number one, you want to make the economy happen because you want to deploy something in that context, right? That will help. Or, that this is an environment that supports the business you want to build, and you would like a piece of the economy that you're creating. That's really the number one reason to get the build token. Let's be clear. Operating the network is the reason for these staking tokens. And there's a lot of value there. It is critical, and most networks don't have a value capture story. It is critical that value accrues to that staking token based on the economic activity of the chain. Otherwise, a successful chain will outgrow the security, the economic security that proof of stake relies on, right? Proof of stake relies on, I'm putting down, $1 million that bets that these validators will execute correctly. And now you can support maybe $1 million of economic activity. If you're supporting $1 billion of economic activity on $1 million down, then that $1 million isn't buying you much safety. Now, there's lots of other, reputation and other reasons why validators don't cheat, but the economic incentive is an important one. And so you want, if the economy grows to $1 billion, that the network value grows commensurately. And so those trickle of rewards from the vaults, from the trading activity that is enabling this economic activity up here, that trickle of rewards should help drive the value of the staking token to grow with, so that the network value grows with the size of the economy, and continues to provide the security that the economy requires. As a result, that means the asset value of holders of this grow as well. But again, our focus is making a working economy. So,
okay, yeah, super interesting. I mean, I'm interested, if I'm now a business here in this economy, I also have to charge like a certain fee in the run that will go basically back to the validators, or can I, like, how am I forced to kind of contribute to that value accrual story, or is that only for the market institutions that you initially provide, or?
The only fees that contracts need to provide is obviously they pay for any services they're using. If they're paying for AMM to do currency conversion, fees come out of that, and that's sort of the normal kinds of fees people expect out of AMMs. And they're paying for execution fees, which ideally are nominal, right? Those should be, like, we don't have a postage budget at our company, even though we do mail, because it's so small it comes out of petty cash. We don't care, right? We would like execution fees to be there. They'll probably be higher than that as we get enough demand, and then gradually we will increase scope, and the goal is to drive them down, right? And so mostly the fees around the business that you're deploying come because someone who's paying run to you, they've got a small fee for having taken the loan to get the run to pay you the run. Right. And so the fee kind of comes out of being able to engage in participating in the economy at all. And so there's no currently planned fee for smart contracts to operate at all. There was some fee you had to pay to deploy, right? You're borrowing space. You are imposing on the operators of the chain to consume space and memory and all that thing over time. And so there will be fees to deploy a contract, to be determined as to exactly what those are, and likely subsidized, for all the early contracts that are getting out there. But that's kind of thing where I don't expect it to be an imposition. It's just, again, enough to make sure that what you get are businesses that are viable and valuable rather than a bunch of spam.
And because it is a lot to do with developer tooling in terms of JavaScript, for example, so we've talked a lot about the internal economy of Agoric. Is there any way for me to use Agoric in some way and your tooling to deploy on other chains, or will that come at some later stage?
So obviously a lot of our stuff is open source. A lot of our technology pieces we've already got out there with, Cosm.js has the secure JavaScript added to it so that wallets can secure themselves. And we're pushing it out through the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem, and we've presented all of that at Web3 as well for other ecosystems. We work with MetaMask to get that into securing the wallets. And so a lot of this technology is available. We're doing a thing called Endo, which is neither node nor done, right? It's an anagram of that. And that incorporates our secure JavaScript along with some of the swing set into a non-blockchain execution environment, so we can use that for servers that are talking to our system, and that'll have eventually some of the async pipeline communication structure, so that our servers easily talk async messages written in JavaScript using the same contract, the same execution model we use on chain. Because some of what's critical is the whole economic integration, we're not focused on getting this running on other chains. I mean, the technology stack, parts of it could be ported there, but as it's evolved, where a big element of the power is going to be the metering model and the value accrual into the validators underneath, and the existence of a stable coin that is backed by staking token, all that sort of thing, there's a non-trivial element of that is intrinsic to being our own zone, as it were, that makes all of that work. We will look at, and other people, and we have looked at, and other people look at, using parts of our technology in other parts of the ecosystem, like using it. So we were talking to Greg of Akash about being able to do smart contracts for auto scaling on Akash, right? But turns out it looks like those would be best just run on Agoric and use IBC to talk to the control nodes. We talked to Filecoin about using our model for doing similar kinds of auto scaling in storage or recovery, or how much caching to do. And there, that would probably run on their nodes and not run on Agoric. But it wouldn't have the same financial balancing and things like that. It would just be taking some small piece of our infrastructure and running there.
So in some ways, I mean, with the Ethereum summer last year, composability, and you mentioned composition at the start, I think for me personally, I think one of the key things that drove that was composability, and how you're composing these little pieces. It sort of sounds like in some ways you're almost recreating this composability part that Ethereum does still have now, but it's a bit more fragmented.
So let me talk about that, because that's really important from the developer model. The model of composability that people are excited about in Ethereum is mostly hard forks, right? I can copy your code, tweak it a little bit, and put it in my system. So the example of Uni grabbing Compound's governance contract, right, and plugging that in, so that and rolling out Uni, and that was a huge success. But dForce took exactly the same contract, the Compound governance contract, integrated in, and they lost $25 million, right? Right. So, do you feel lucky? Right? And so, code copying, it's been around since the dawn of programming, and it was a great idea in the 70s. But by the 80s, we had learned about OO programming and composition with encapsulation as being a better way to grow systems, where if I copy your code, now it's part of my stack and I'm owning that, right? In GitHub, most applications in Node, you can do the static analysis, and they did so. Only 3% of the code is unique to the application. 97% of the code of most applications written in JavaScript or written in Ruby or any system that has any kind of package level sharing, only 3% of it is native, 97% of it is packages from elsewhere, right? And when you code copy, you take ownership of that. So now you've got, 30 times the code that you are now having to deal with CVEs. You're now having to deal with maintenance. You're now having to deal with how you manage it, right? And if you can't and so that's infeasible. And so they can't share code anywhere near as much, and they can't share it safely, right? The reason why React.js or Node.js took off literally exponentially is because I could take packages that other people had built and merely parameterize them, not copy them, not break them. I could connect to them, plug them into my system in a way that followed a set of rules such that I understood how the composition worked, and deploy an application that used those components. And that's the model that you must have in order to build on the shoulders of other programmers. And that's what we need for exponential growth in the programmability of these things. That's why, it wasn't just that React had a big company backing it and pushing it, because there have been plenty of UI frameworks that were backed and pushed by big companies that no one remembers anymore, right? it got the growth because it had a model that allowed that kind of component composition. And that's not a kind of composition you get at all in Ethereum, right? The composition that happens in Ethereum is notable because it's rare and because it's hard and because it's a little dangerous, right? Whereas, you mostly don't think about React in composition. You've got millions, literally millions of programmers doing composition vastly superior to that every day in React because that's just what you do, right? So, and it's a framework with particular interfaces and structures and patterns to follow to build your component so that it plugs well and safely together with other components in a way of parameterizing them so they fit together and so forth. And the net result is this scalability. We do that same kind of thing where instead of making it so components can fit together their rendering inside of the rendering of other components, we do that for economic activity. So you've got components that can do trade or auctions or, swaps, fees, liquidation, and so forth. So our treasury elements, our economy elements, the treasury with the stable local currency, the AMM, governance, all of those things are not just, here's a big monolithic thing you could copy code from and reuse, but instead the treasury, for example, has a separate contract component, which is the liquidation module. And that liquidation module is just, the treasury says, oh, I got to liquidate this, let me hand it off. And it's pluggable by governance where we could change what liquidation module it's going to use next time it does liquidations. And that same module could be plugged in where if you had your own debt instrument, you could build a different strategy that you wanted for your debt instrument, but you didn't want to do a new liquidation thing. There's already someone who's come up with this lovely rate limited thing that can also run its own auction and automatically promote itself in some other sales facility there. And you just plug that in for your liquidations, and now you've got a debt instrument with liquidations there. You grab exactly the same governance component that we use for chain governance to decide who's on the executive committee of the foundation or whatever it is. You plug that into your governance contract, or to just say, I want an instance of that, but to use my liquidity token instead of the native token of the chain. You plug that in. Now you didn't have to build it. It's battle tested. It's got smart contract insurance pool behind it, all those kinds of things. And you get to focus on what's special of your application. That's real composability. That's what we're going for. And that's what gives you that exponential growth of development.
That's a great story. I think I want to take it back a little bit to like the Cosmos ecosystem, and maybe also in this composability model. Of course, the Cosmos SDK also has the modules. And right now you also mentioned the governance you're using. How does that compare? Do you see like is there also composability in terms of modules? Are you using those? Are you building your own thing? Maybe can you kind of...
Right. So that's mostly, technical consideration. We are largely not constrained by the Cosmos SDK architecture so much as Tendermint, but we leverage, like we use the heck out of IBC. We use the staking module. So we participate in the IBC on an ongoing basis and help evolve it. And in fact, I probably owe Sam and others some reviews and Aditya some reviews. We have done code reviews. We're working with folks on the Epoch staking module because the plan for Agoric will use Epoch staking and rewards. And so we do leverage those where it makes sense. But the way to think about modules in the Cosmos ecosystem is that's not smart contract composability particularly. Yes, each new module is a smart contract, but then you deploy a whole zone to do it. Most applications or many applications don't need or deserve a zone of their own, right? If I was going to do I use stop loss because that was one of the things that Sommelier first started out to do is add stop loss to that was one of their examples, add stop loss to Uniswap, right? From a Cosmos zone, right? And I was thinking about, well, okay, what's stop loss? It's wake up when the price crosses this, go to my AMM liquidity position and pull it out. Sounds like 20 lines of JavaScript. What would it take to deploy that? Do I really want to deploy, 15 validators in order to do something that can be done with 20 lines of JavaScript? Probably not. But that only works if I'm in a place where I can easily deploy 20 lines of JavaScript instead of an entire network, right? And so, there are plenty of businesses that are small or that I want to roll out rapidly or that don't intrinsically need a new validator ecosystem in order to run. A VM chain is hugely valuable for that kind of thing. There are ones that are different, that are novel, that do require some difference in the underlying chain stuff, and those definitely need a new zone, independent of whether they're programming in JavaScript or in Go. If you're doing geolocation as an intrinsic part of your chain infrastructure, yeah, you might need to change some of the core modules in Cosmos SDK. So, so there's some spectrum of things that will be zones because it was easy to do as a module, but I really think of the Cosmos SDK as a toolkit for constructing new zones when you need to, but it's not really designed for multiple things interoperating on the same chain. It's really, there's a coherent single thing that chain is doing, and, plugged together by the modules that are part of that chain, and then I deploy it to do those things. And obviously one of those things might be a VM chain, but that's not at the level of modules. That's at the level of execution on top of that, which might show the module semantics through to, WASM in the Cosm.js or the Cosm WASM case, or, into an MCX in the Enigma case, or into JavaScript in our case. But we carefully arrange for them to show through consistent with the very lightweight, very extensible JavaScript model. So you're programming in this, simple digital asset rights transfer model where it's JavaScript objects. You're not programming in a model where you say, okay, I'm now going to transfer money to address some long random number, right? It's no, I'm going to do, Felix.enjoy open paren concert ticket. Right. And that's my expression. And the fact that underneath crypto happens and it gets transferred into some account underneath or not, I'm agnostic to as a programmer. And what we then did, we have it's called the VBank module that we added, where now I can take any bank account in the Cosmos bank and bring it up into JavaScript. So I have a JavaScript purse whose balance is reflected in Cosmos. And so now I can have my staking show up as Cosmos level Merkle tree accounts, which means all the Cosmos tools work for that. I can move things in and out of that with IBC. I can use the voting contracts to vote it. I can use standard, Cosmos commands for custody to be able to stake it and all those kinds of things. And so we get, so far the best of both worlds in that regard. And, we occasionally figure out, okay, how are we going to, get our epoch staking with the staking module or something like that. But it turns out, those things we can upstream changes into the Cosmos modules, or work with people that are already doing that to grow the general Cosmos functionality as well. So we're enjoying it.
I think you've given a really, really great overview into what Agoric is, and some very cool discussions on the stablecoin and what build will be used for. I think, Felix and I are both really excited to see this go live, and the sorts of projects, especially, that will start building on this. And I think the real sort of start almost of really niche, almost sort of markets, etc., being created in the Cosmos ecosystem, and then with IBC as well. It'd be really cool to see what else you can bring into your own sort of chain here. So yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show today, Dean. Felix and I, is that
I just wanted to add one thing. You talk about the programmability or the programming. We have a bounty program where it's now, the APIs are available, the contracts are available. People can start actually building things on our system to roll out with our, future releases. So I just wanted to make sure we got that in here at the end.
Yeah. So that was a good wrap-up message. I think we wanted to give you a chance to shout out something. So again, thanks so much for coming on, and we're looking forward to supporting the mainnet launch soon with Chorus One, of course. And maybe now you have another chance to pitch some things about Agoric and where to find you and the company.
Excellent. So obviously we're at agoric.com. You can register for the mailing list. We have a Discord that we have a bunch of developers, and obviously lots of validators for our incentivized testnet in. And we have the bounty program just started. So there's 3 challenging ones out there, but we're going to be adding a whole lot more as we go forward. So on our site. You can see the roadmap out with a soft launch coming soon, but the real launch of Treasury is end of summer, end of Q3, and we're really excited for people to come start building because the APIs are there. It's a lot of fun to be able to build smart contracts in JavaScript and use existing tools to just rapidly iterate and see what you can build. So.
No, for sure. And I think for anyone not watching this and only listening in, I think this is one of the more epic backgrounds Felix and I have ever seen in in any sort of video call before. So yeah, Dean.
It's not even virtual. It's like a real thing.
We're taking fire.
Hard to describe it because it's so epic. But yeah, Dean, thanks so much for your time. And yeah, we'll catch you around the place. Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for having me.
Bye.